All right, we have a wonderful case here. I would like to begin with this one and just focus on one thing right now. And I want to focus on this implant that's planned at site number 27. And there's a very specific thing that I would like us to focus on here because I think it's very important. So for the time being, let's go ahead and forget about the implants on the upper right-hand side and the implants on site 22, 23, 24, 25. And let's just focus on this implant in the canine site. So what I really want to focus here is I really push and believe in the part of using the 360 view, going through my checklist on how to plan implants. And there's one thing specifically I want to focus on here. So if you don't mind, just bear with me on this and let's take a look at this implant and we'll maximize the tangential view, which is the buccolingual view. And if we take a look here, we can clearly see that our, excuse me, I'm going to go back here. We can clearly see that our mental foramen is way back here, okay? So it is very easy to believe that there's plenty of distance here, there's no need to map the nerve. But there is a thing called the anterior loop, and that is where the nerve will come forward and then loop backwards. And I want us to show us that because if we don't go through the 360 or if we're not totally aware of the anatomical considerations here, it's very easy to miss that. So what I would like to do is come here in the 360 and I'm going to again take my pen here and quickly draw what looks to be the mental foramen, or at least the end of the mental foramen right there. And again, we can see how much space we have there between the mental foramen and our implant. So now what I would like to do is go through our 360, and as I go through it, I want you to notice that there is a clear right there. We can see it very nicely. And what we can see here is a clear demarcation of our anterior loop right there. So now this does change our planning. Now instead of believing that our distance was from here to here, our distance in reality is from here to here. And now things become a little bit tighter. So to give us an idea, let's take a look at what kind of distance we have here. So from the end of our implant to the nerve, we have 1.21 millimeters. Now, we know very clearly, as I've taught in our programs, that the drill for these implants is always longer. So the drill for this implant would actually be something like that. Now, our distance is less than 1.21. In fact, our drill on an average number, again, it's very specific for each system, so don't go by average numbers, is about 1 millimeter longer. So really we're about 1/4 millimeter away from the nerve. Now we take into this consideration the average guide has a deviation of about 1/4 millimeter or so, maybe even up to 1/2 millimeter. Now we're really taking the risk of getting very close to the nerve. So I think again, I do want to point this out because I think it's unbelievably important to understand that we need to go through the 360 view and that we need to take a very close look at what's going on here so we can understand that there is an anterior loop on this particular case. Now, if I may, at the same time, I would like to also evaluate a couple other things while I'm in with this particular implant. So one of the things I always like to look at is I always like to mentally, I'm not saying you visually need to do this, but mentally I like to go ahead and draw out what appears to be my bone, okay? And then I like to go ahead and draw out my tooth. That's a rough drawing. And now what I'm able to see here is the area of bone that we have. So what I'm concerned about with this particular implant is how little bone we have for stability. In other words, all of this implant part right here, let me change the colors if you don't mind here. All of this part of the implant right here, all of that right there is non-engaged. It's like it's not even there. In other words, that's going to be floating in the tooth socket. So we're depending on engagement from just this part right here. Now, some implant systems, that's enough, depending on the aggressiveness of the threads. Now, in this particular case, with this being a traditional Aster implant, we're not really having a lot of apical engagement here. The rule of thumb that we follow is that we would like to have 3 millimeters of apical engagement for stability, again, depending on the type of implant you're using. If you're using, like, for example, a Nobel Active implant, Megagen Any Ridge, or Implant Direct Legacy 3 implant, implants that have MIS implant as well, an implant that has a significant amount of bite and grab to it, 3 millimeters is enough to give us stability. So I have some concerns about this particular implant plan in of itself. So again, just as review for this particular video, I wanted to point out several things on this particular case. One was the anterior loop, as we can see in this view right here, okay? And as I move through, you can see that. And then I want to point out the apical stability, or lack thereof, of this particular implant. In fact, to get the stability, we would probably need to go to like a 17 millimeter implant with this particular case. And then when we come back, to this view, now we're really going to be into the nerve. So again, I hope this has been helpful. We will come back and look at this case from other views, but our goal right now is just to focus on this particular area of planning. Thank you very much.